Joe Escalante from the Vandals, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
I'm Dan Steinberg. This is Promoter 101, episode 23. We're recording from South by Southwest Music Conference in Austin, Texas. Our special co-host this week is Sara Mertz from Eventbright, filling in for the lovely Luke Pierce, who is, well, just not fucking in Austin.
Well, that's too bad, but I'm excited to be a part of the podcast with such a great lineup. Solo agencies in London, John Giddings. Gersh Agency, reigning king of comedy, agent Rick Greenstein. Siren Management's Adam Parsons. And a quick check-in with Russian concert promoter Semyon Galperin. Plus, the news of the week.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun week. If you have any questions or comments, please just email us at steiny@promoter101.net.
Hey, it's Nick Light. I am presently the Senior VP of Artist Development and Touring for RCA Records here at South by Southwest, doing the Promoter 101 podcast.
Promoter 101 World Tour continues, so come see us when we come to a town near you.
April 19th, we'll be at Canadian Music Week 2017. We're going to be doing the whole podcast live right in front of your eyes with special guests Golden Voice, Elliot Lefko, and UTA's Jack Ross. We're going to have a couple surprises like Dead Donut or Canadian, Truth or Patron. You never know what we're going to be throwing in, and a bunch of other guests hanging out, always to surprise you at fun conferences like Canadian Music Week.
This is Whitney Bond from 888 Management, reminding you to keep your mazel strong, appearing live on Promoter 101.
It's time for the news of the week.
Live Nation has acquired a major stake in Isles of Wight, one of UK's most famous major festivals. Its founder, John Giddings of Solo Music Agency, will remain at the helm, as reported by Polestar. He's also going to be our main guest this week. That should be fun.
And the Palace Theater opens in St. Paul.
Hey, big congrats to Nate, Sonia, and Dana on finally getting that one open. I know they've been working on that for a while.
It looks awesome, too. R.I.P. to James Cotton, 81, known as one of the best blues harmonica players of all time. He died of pneumonia in Austin.
A quick correction from last week's Andrew Druskin interview. The first band to ever sell a ticket online was not actually Low. It turns out it was Swell. Andrew wanted to point that out as his memory corrected himself and called us to let us know, so we wanted to get you guys the updated info.
And Superfly is taking the model for San Francisco's Outside Lands and bringing it to Phoenix with Lost Lake Festival, October 20th to 22nd at the city's 75-acre Steel Indian School Park.
So we're here at South by Southwest, and lots of neat things are going on. It's clearly a different conference. It's changing. It feels like there's less people here than have been here in past years. How's your conference going, Sara?
You know, I've been enjoying it. It's a little bit dialed back. There's a little less commercial players involved. There's a little more music and more fun people as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the bar seemed a little easier to get to, although they seem to be closing a little early at the Driscoll for some reason.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's
you might have to have a word with them.
The business that doesn't want to take our money. It's very confusing to an entrepreneur. But it seems like a lot of bands are here, and a lot of the players are here. It just seems like there's the static electricity that normally comes with South by is missing.
Well, it is St. Patrick's Day, and things are riling up in the streets out there. There's a lot of girls in short shorts and green funny hats, so we shall see.
All right, well, I'm going to get excited about that. What of the bands that you've seen here that are really exciting to you this year?
You know, honestly, Banks played a killer set last night. The StubHub House down the road, Rainy Street.
Very cool. Seems like the buzz is on. I don't think there's less of the major acts that like do the comeback plays. Like the REMs at Stubbs. Like that used to be my favorite thing. I haven't seen a lot of the big bands like underplaying South by.
Well, why would you want to come here if you were a big band? Wouldn't you want to go somewhere else where people pay for tickets?
If I were a big band, I think I'd love to come back because I think there's something to being introduced to the younger fans and showing there's no ego, that you're not above it. I'm Dan Steinberg, and this is an editorial. After attending the South by Southwest Promoter Agent meeting this past Friday, I'm very concerned with the overwhelming number of talent buyers that have seemingly forgotten that we are in a service business. It is our job to help the artists in all their needs to produce their shows. The constant complaining about the artist's needs must stop. We've been blessed to work with these amazingly talented artists. It's an honor that we've been entrusted to help them produce their shows and all of the parts that go along with them. Not only did we agree to take them on, but in many cases we fought for the opportunity. I truly believe we have the best job in the world serving the fans and the artists. This meeting has changed over the years. It originally started out with the agents in one room and the promoters in another. We took the first 30 minutes and collectively discussed and worked out topics we wanted to address with each other. Then we merged the meetings. This no longer happens. It just is one big meeting all together from the start. Also, a lot of the major players don't attend anymore. And can you blame them? No one in their right mind would want to come and be bitched at during their vacation or fun time at South by. Of course they're not coming. Why would they? So I would like to use this platform to ask Billboard, Polestar, ILMC, Canadian Music Week, and even South by Southwest to bring back this format at any or all of your conferences. And to all of my counterparts, return to the conversation. I believe we can do a lot of good if we come together and focus on the issues we need to work on together as a community, instead of simply pointing and blaming each other. Thank you for your time.
That's a wrap for the news this week.
Hi, my name's Ed Bicknell, and I'm Promoter 101, and I'm in room 24 something, and I've got an inside leg measurement of 32 inches and a cup size of 31A.
Let's catch up on Dan's hashtag Promoter101 tweets from the past week. I love when people say X, Y, and Z.
It's not really an industry thing. I just think it was funny as shit.
There are only two kinds of people, those who buy tickets and those who don't. That's a quote from Mr. Barry Fay.
It's a great quote from the legendary Colorado promoter, and for some reason I felt it was important to remember him this week. And I love that quote.
When an agency tells you at 5:59 p.m. on a Friday that they want to break a tour next week.
Yeah, this kills my staff. Please don't do this anymore. We love lead time. We still want your shows, but man, they want their weekend too.
That does it for Promoter 101 tweets.
This is Paul Lohr at New Frontier Touring in Nashville, Tennessee, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
The week's feature interview is the CEO of the solo agencies in London, John Giddings.
Promoter 101, we are with an icon today. Thank you so much for being with us, John.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with some history. How did your career come about?
Okay, well, I was 14 at school, and my friend said to me, my group has split up. Why don't you learn to play bass? We'll pull some chicks. So he taught me a few riffs like Sunshine of Your Love, White Room. And we were doing a gig at Harpenden Youth Club, and we were actually playing the Nile song by Pink Floyd. And a skinhead came and stood in front of me and said, if you don't fucking stop playing now, I'm going to fucking hit you. And it was like the end of my musical career, really. Because I realised I was better at booking the gig than being in it. When you play with musicians, you realise you're not a musician. But at least I realised at an early age. So I wanted to be associated with music. I didn't know how to do it until my friend, local guy, became social secretary at the local college. And through that, he met agents in London and got a job in London. His name was John Fenton. He went to the Sherry Copeland Agency. So I'm the only person in the world who decided if they went to university, they should become social sec, meet people in the music business and get a job. And that's what I did.
That's a great story. You became the guy behind
Yeah, but it's the only chance I had. I could never get a real job.
Excellent. Now, you work with one of the most legendary festivals in the world.
Yeah, I'm really lucky that I went there in 1970 and saw Jimi Hendrix and the Doors. And they had 600,000 people on the Isle of Wight. So by Act of Parliament, they banned any gatherings of over 5,000 people overnight for the next 32 years. So in, 2001, the Isle of Wight Council asked everyone in the music business to tender to restart the festival, and nobody was interested or wanted to go there because it's an island you can only get to by boat. I went down there for a laugh, really, because I thought it was a good day out, and I was sitting on the ferry, looking at the Solent, seeing the QE2 sail by, and I thought, why don't I have a festival? I've been to everybody else's for the last 30, 40 years. And thankfully, it's taken off.
And you've been doing it now for a while, right?
This year is our 16th year.
And the lineup's incredibly diverse. Run DMC to Rod Stewart, right?
Well, the point is, because I'm old, I like an eclectic mix of past, present and future. And by doing that, you get people from 15 to 50 or 60. And the mix of people means they behave better. Our audience like to drink a lot. They don't like to take a lot of drugs. You know, when you have Leeds Reading, it's a certain genre. When kids do it, they do their O-levels and go there. And it's the first festival they've been to and the first time they're having a laugh and they kick off. Download is a heavy rock festival. The V's are a pop festival. We like a mix of all kinds of acts. You know, we've got the Vamps, who are like an up-and-coming boy band. Zara Larsson, Clean Bandit have been #1. But Rod Stewart's an all-time classic.
It's a very cool lineup. It's one of the most diverse I've seen this year.
Yeah, well, I think although it's diverse, they can all entertain in a field. You don't book acts just because they're in the charts. You book acts because they've got a great catalogue and they can perform to a large audience. And what you want to do is create an environment where people move around the site. They don't stand in front of the main stage all day long and watch 10 acts in a row. They go to the Big Top or Cirque de la Quirque. Or you have to have other entertainment as well as groups as well. You're always trying to keep ahead of the game. It's like a Formula One car. You're trying to evolve throughout the season.
All right, well, let's talk about Formula One. I've been told that's a huge pastime of yours.
It's definitely something I'm very interested in. Bernie Eccleston hired me to do Formula One Rocks, which was brilliant because I love hanging out, with drivers. The difference between pop stars and Grand Prix drivers is Grand Prix drivers risk their lives, but they're not as recognisable as pop stars. And a Grand Prix is essentially a festival that travels around the world. It's just another gig. At Silverstone, you rent the circuit for a week, you put a campsite up, and you put this race on. But when I did it with Bernie, I said, nobody's going to come to a gig called Formula One Rocks. They're only going to come if it says the Rolling Stones or Metallica. And it didn't survive, really, but he was prepared to pay me money and give me a paddock pass, which is great. But now Liberty Media have bought Formula One, and Liberty Media own Live Nation, and I'm a consultant to Live Nation, so hopefully I can get my feet back under the table.
Panic pass?
All these Grand Prix, I've had Rihanna, Shakira in Singapore, I've had Pharrell Williams in Baku, gigs in Abu Dhabi. It's great, but you've got to like it. Most people in the music business like football, and I know nothing about football.
Do you mean American football, or do you mean what we would consider soccer?
Oh, no, I know about American football. I support the Dolphins, but everybody here supports either Chelsea or Arsenal or Manchester United, and I don't have any interest in that at all.
Okay, so let's talk about you're a promoter and you're an agent at this point, and that's something that has got to cover both two caps and a whole lot of different vision with that.
Well, when you're a promoter, you realise what it's like to lose your own money. That's the fundamental difference. And when you're an agent, the money you earn pays for the seats you sit on. So when I was growing up, people got big time and wanted these big offices and expensive furniture and stuff. And I've always worked on the principle, have a small office, small staff, make the profit and take it home, because you're better off spending it at home. Because your artists, be it Mick Jagger or Bono, don't want to come round to your office. You're instructed what to do by phone or email. And so you need to be humble in what you do, not big time, really.
Okay, so how did Solo come to be?
Solo came to be because my first job was at MAM. Barry Dickens gave me a job. He couldn't decide between me and Paul Loseby, who now manages Dave Gilmour. So I employed us both. And then after 4 weeks, Paul got bored and went off to work for Harvey Goldsmith. And I was going to leave, actually, but Barry left to form ITB with Rod McSween.
Seemed to work out.
Yeah. By accident, I became second in command. And because I knew about punk music, I had X-Ray Specs, the adverts. The Ramones decided to stick with me, and so did Iggy Pop. So by default, I managed to be in the right place at the right time. And then the guy who was my boss was Ian Wright. And I persuaded him that we should leave MAM, because if we were ever going to succeed, we had to make the money for ourselves. And I should have taken the hint, actually, when I walked up to Barry Clayman to resign, because Ian wasn't behind me. And I walked in, and Barry said to me, and I quote, "How long does it take to resign?" And I said, "Funny you should say that." He said, "Just do me one favour." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Fuck off now, because you're doing business on our time." So he said two of the nicest things ever. He said, "Listen, one door closes, another one opens. If you ever need any help, always call me." So I went downstairs, picked up my stereo, went down in the lift, went out the front door holding the stereo, and Barry was standing there, and he said, "Where are you taking this?" I said, "I'm stealing it." So we walked round the corner. You wouldn't be allowed to do this now, to walk out with all your
Security would
staff
show you out, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be slightly different. But you couldn't solicit all your artists. We literally started next day with our roster. And the first morning, I mean, we had no furniture or anything, really. We had a telex machine, I remember, and Errol Brown from Hot Chocolate came round with 2 bottles of champagne, and we had no glasses. So he went next door to Phoenix and bought some glasses for us. So by 11 o'clock in the first morning of our new business, which was called TBA International, we were pissed. And there's a guy called Don Murphy, a security guy, called up. And we didn't want to take the call because we were drunk. And he insisted we would take the call. And I picked up the phone and he said, I am the new manager for Adam and the Ants and you are the new agents, and put the phone down. So the first morning of our first business, he gave us like the biggest act in the country at the time, the number one act. So it was great. It was a fantastic 5 years. But sadly for me, I mean, Ian had bigger acts when we started out, but I had Paul Young, Alison Moyet, Howard Jones, Big Country, Tears for Fears, and my acts became bigger, and it became problematic between the two of us ego-wise. And I think it's hard to describe what happened really financially. Anyway, it wasn't very good for me, so I decided that we should split up. So my company is called Solo because I went solo, and it's a musical term. I went on my own.
Left the band behind. And
Yes, yeah. Musical differences, I think, is what we should probably say.
So were you always promoting at the same time as being an agent, or did the promoting come in later?
No, we've always promoted. You know, we promoted Big Country and Paul Young. I mean, the good news was I didn't really know what I was doing, so I made it up as I went along. I promoted X-Ray Specs at Hammersmith Odeon, as it was called at the time. I didn't know where the dressing room was. I showed them the broom cupboard. But it was exciting. You didn't have all these lawyers and accountants chasing you all the time about the extra 10p. It was a game of chance, much more so. But to come into the music business when punk was occurring, I mean, I walked into the Nashville on the Cromwell Road, and the Sex Pistols were playing. It doesn't get more exciting than that. You know, it gave you a chance to sign an act that could be in the charts 2 weeks later.
That's actually pretty incredible to think about.
It wouldn't happen so much now. It's much more, you know, the music business has completely changed. iTunes and CD, well, first of all, albums were destroyed by CDs. It destroyed the artwork, so it became tiny and you couldn't read the credits. Then iTunes, you could start to download a track from an album, so it harmed the album concept. I mean, nobody will make a Tommy or a Dark Side of the Moon anymore. It's completely different with streaming. I still don't understand how anybody apart from Adele and Ed Sheeran can make money from me paying £10 a month to Spotify and I can listen to anything I like.
Yeah, I think that definitely favors the live side of the music right now, for sure.
Well, it's great. I mean, when I left university, I actually tried to get a job in a record company, and there were 21 record companies I applied to, and they all turned me down. So I had to become an agent. But being in the live music industry now is the best place to be.
Yeah, I think Jay Marciano said to us a couple months ago, if you can't make money in the concert business right now, you are in the wrong game.
That's absolutely correct. I don't understand where all these people get all this money from for U2, Shakira, Lady Gaga, Sting, Phil Collins, and that's only the ones we're doing at the moment.
So let's talk about that. Some of your artists are very big. Some of them you've been with you a very long time. Iggy Pop has been very loyal to you, right?
Over 30 years, yeah. How did I meet Jim? I think it was when David Bowie was the keyboard player in the band, because I looked after David for 30 years, which I'm really proud of. I mean, as an artist, he was the greatest of all time. But there's two people. There's James Osterberg and there's Iggy Pop. And of all the acts I've ever represented, the people ask most about Iggy Pop and the Ramones, which is quite interesting. And Jim is just a great, intelligent, sophisticated guy who's got a great catalogue of music, doesn't tolerate fools, and I really enjoy working with him.
This is an amazing roster. Now, you guys have booked the world except North America, right?
That's right. I mean, again, with punk groups, it was really hard breaking into Europe. People like Herman Sherman would help us in Belgium. That's how I met all those promoters at an early stage, because they would do me favours and develop acts. But it was only with early 80s, with Duran and Tears for Fears, when we got into Japan, Australia, and we toured the world for the first time, really. That's how we gained experience of it. And I remember Wayne Forte calling me up and saying, can you get Wembley for David Bowie? And I booked Wembley Arena, and he sent me a telex back saying, no, I mean Wembley Stadium. And I went up there and booked it, and my legs shook for 5 minutes, actually, because I didn't know what I was doing. But it's just a bigger gig, really. You sell the tickets and you have more security.
I guess in the booking concept of it, promoting, there's a lot of more logistics in a stadium show, of course.
It's much easier to be a promoter when you have no money, because you're not actually risking anything. When you have some money, it becomes a much bigger gamble. And it's, you know, now with the big companies, Live Nation, AEG, it's a big, big game, and you need a corporate structure to battle the world.
Have you guys thought about going into the U.S. and booking? It's the only thing you guys haven't conquered, it seems.
First of all, when I thought the only way I can become successful is by having a link in America. So late 80s, early 90s, I knew Wayne Forte because he'd, really helped me, and we'd worked with Paul Young. And
This is when him and Michael were ruling the world.
yeah, that's right. They had great acts, The Cure, Depeche Mode, Duran, and I sold them half my company, so we became Solo ITG. And partners in that company were Michael Cole and Tony Smith, who represented the Rolling Stones and Genesis. So that was probably the best move I ever made by achieving that. And then it went from strength to strength, really, because I got into stadium touring. And so through, what was it? First one was Phil Collins, then it became Genesis, then it was the Rolling Stones. Through the Rolling Stones, we got U2. Oh, well, the Rolling Stones, the meeting in Toronto, I think it was, when they said, and so you're going to book the European tour, but you can't be called the agent. And there was a pregnant pause. And they said, you've got to be called the European tour promoter. I thought, well, that actually sounds better. So we went outside the room. And Donna O'Donnell said to me, we need you to come and hear this girl singing. I thought, what do I want to do that for? I want to celebrate getting the Rolling Stones tour, which was the biggest act in the world.
I feel like I know where this is going.
And they took me to this 400-seat theatre. I had a ticket in the second row, and this woman came on and sang for an hour and 20 minutes. She was obviously very good. I'd love to say I'm a talent spotter, but I just thought she was really good. And I went backstage and met this bloke called Renee, and they were the most charming people I'd ever met.
This is pre-Titanic, I take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he said, can you get us a gig in London? I thought, they're nice. I booked a theatre, and the rest was history. 3 years later, we did 2 Wembley stadiums. You know, I was Celine's agent for 20 years. Fantastic relationship. Beautiful lady. Always said please and thank you.
Donald had an idea.
Yeah. Well, she's the only artist I've ever represented who asked me if I was making enough money.
My mouth just hit the ground because I've never heard that come out of any artist's mouth.
It's a true story. She said to me, it was in Edinburgh, she said, how have we done tonight? How have we done tonight? And I said, put it this way, you sold more tickets than our other acts at a higher ticket price. She said, you must be a good promoter. I said, no, actually, it's not my name on the poster, it's yours. I mean, she's wonderful. One of the greatest artists I've ever worked with. And then it gets even better. The first arena tour we were doing, I wanted to do someone a favour and put an act on as support. And Renee called me up and said, you can't do that. You've got to do David Foster a favour. And he sent me this white label cassette of this group. So 2 weeks before the tour, I thought, Jesus, I better listen to this. So I put it on, and there was this girl singing, and I thought it was really good. So I turned the cassette over, and there's this bloke's name on the back who I called up, and I said, have you got an agent? He said, no. I said, well, don't do anything till you turn up in Glasgow, and we'll have a conversation. And I turned up in Glasgow, and 3 of the best-looking women you've ever seen in your life walked in. It was the Cause. I mean,
so a bit of luck and
a lot of luck being in the right place at the right time, but you still have to deliver, don't you? You know, I would say the people that have made my career, first of all, there was Wayne Forte and Michael Farrell. That went to Michael Cole and Tony Smith. That went to Arthur Fogel, and that went to Michael Rubino.
Okay, and how did the Madonna relationship come about?
Oh, the Madonna relationship came through U2 and Arthur Fogel, because she wanted to be represented by the people doing the biggest tour in the world, which was U2 at the time. And she met with Arthur, and they got on, and he made a proposal to her. And the rest, you know, I think, how many tours have we done? 5, I think. I mean, she's the greatest female artist of all time, really, isn't she?
Brilliant.
Yeah, she's an icon beyond icon. Iconicness? I don't know what the word is.
She's an artist.
Exactly.
Okay, so where's the future of the business as far as you've seen it?
I mean, nowadays it's all about The Weeknd, Drake, Rihanna. It's evolved, you know, Ed Sheeran doing 3 nights at Wembley Stadium. He said to me, should I do 2 or 3 nights? I said, you're mad, do 3, do as many as you can. You know, it's a moment in time. I think it's harder now because record companies won't stick with a Simple Minds or a U2 because they won't invest in a group for 4 or 5 albums. If they don't happen on their first or maybe second, they'll get dumped and move on. So it's much quicker. I worry about who we're creating as the future headliners in 20 years' time. Because when I look back over the 15 years of the Isle of Wight Festival, all the headliners still exist. Paul McCartney, Coldplay, Muse, the Rolling Stones. But you see all these acts that were hot at the time, the Thrills, the Darkness, you know, they're still around, but at a much lower level.
Very few bands like Pearl Jam that have stayed the course.
Yeah, that's right, that being created.
There's not a lot of Aerosmiths coming up behind them.
No, I worry about that because sadly we've lost a lot of people in the last couple of years, Leonard Cohen, David Bowie, Prince, and it's like, who are the new ones who are going to take the crown? And I don't honestly know that answer.
So there is a lot more shows playing stadiums than there ever have been before.
Yeah, well, shows are getting bigger, but it's become a normal thing to play a stadium as opposed to when I was growing up. Well, when I was growing up, it was abnormal to go to a festival. It was a left field thing to do. When we started the Isle of Wight, there were 400 festivals. Now there's 1,500 in the UK alone. So it's a rite of passage for a young person to go to a festival now. And going to a stadium, people don't see it as a hardship anymore. They think it's a normal thing to do. After Live Aid, stadium touring became normal.
So I think a lot of the kids in the US would think that festivals are an American thing, and I think Paul Tollett would be the first person to credit that came out of Europe.
Yeah, I mean, I think America was 20 years behind us on the festival scene. Rock Werchter, Rock at the Ring, Pink Pop, they existed long before Lollapalooza, and now they're catching up very, very quickly. And with their dance festivals as well.
With the bigger promoters in the world based in America, how does that affect business internationally?
I mean, now with Live Nation and AG, it stems from America, really. Everywhere else has become a satellite. It used to be separate, but now it's all one across the board. But you can tell when I go to a Live Nation meeting in LA, you look around the room, if you don't necessarily know anyone, you know whether they're American or European by the way they dress. Quite amusing, really.
Well, it's a little interesting what Michael had decided to do, Rapinoe, when he became CEO and decided he wanted to be a global promoter, not just Europe and America and Australia. He's bought out a lot of these guys that have been in some of these countries that don't necessarily have the same business mind setting. They're concert promoters in Italy or Spain, and how he's been able to uniform that and bring up his volume is pretty amazing.
Well, he's a great guy. He's brought the world together. He came to Europe as the marketing guy in the first place because Arthur told me to meet with him because he said we would get on, and we got the Clear Channel, it was at the time, office at Oxford Circus together, and we've been firm friends ever since. I mean, Rapinoe has a vision which very, very few people are capable of. I mean, he can talk without notes for 2 hours. Address a conference room. I can do it for 10 seconds. He's got true talent and he deserves every credit he gets for it.
And speaking of that, you are doing the keynote at Canadian Music Week.
Oh, I've forgotten that. Well, you get interviewed. It's very easy when you're interviewed as opposed to just speaking off the bat. People asking questions like now is 10 times easier prompting you than actually having to come with it yourself.
It seems like it'd be a better format, but yeah, now you're obviously getting offered a lot more of those industry lead keynote kind of things at this point. Is there a lot that goes into taking that on?
No, but I think it's probably becoming time to pass the mantle to younger people to give their view and impression of the business. When I joined the music business, I used to sign acts saying you don't want to go with them, they're dinosaurs, they've been around too long, and now I'm one of those people, effectively.
You got to appreciate the humbleness in you referring to yourself as a dinosaur.
Well, the thing about the music business is the more successful you are, the more humble you should be. And it gives a lot of people an excuse to be very egotistical, which is sad, really. It's good to see so many more women coming up in the business as well.
Yeah, it seems like there's been a gap for that for a very long time, but you're starting to see more of it. And obviously here you've got Emma, who's been very successful.
Yeah, Marsha Vlasic is a great agent. There's lots of women in high places. Selena runs legal at Live Nation. And Anna is the promoter in Sweden.
Corey Christopher's doing great in the States right now with the Magic Dragon.
I noticed on, when was it? Oh, last night at the Live Nation Drinks, how many more women there were compared to the year before. And it's a good thing to see because I think women are more efficient at their jobs, actually, and less egotistical. But that's just my personal opinion.
Excellent. So Michael Cole comes into your business and brings you to the stadium level. How did that wound up ending with him going to Clear Channel? Did that change the game?
Yeah, what happened? He became part of Clear Channel, which became Live Nation. Then they were forming Artist Nation, and we were signing Zach Brown at the time.
It's a Mike Luba thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely right. But it kind of fizzled out somewhere along the line. So Michael Cole split with Michael Rapinoe, and Arthur took on the mantle, became head of worldwide touring, whatever the title is, and has done a brilliant job in doing it. But I mean, I love Michael Cole. He's producing Bat Out of Hell with Tony Smith. I'm going to see that next Tuesday. Well, Arthur and Michael are joined at the hip. Michael Cole has gone a separate way, but I've always perceived us as four people together on the same path.
But they're not involved with the company anymore, correct?
No,
solo?
No, not to my knowledge. I think when Michael Cole will probably do the Phil Collins tour of America, and I would imagine would do it in conjunction with Live
So that's going to
Nation.
happen.
God, I hope so. I mean, 12 years later, he's decided to tour again, because the last tour was called the First Final Farewell Tour, and this tour is called Not Dead Yet. Phil has a great sense of humour and is a great artist.
Is there any chance that turns into a Genesis reunion tour at any point?
In my dreams. But so is Pink Floyd in my dreams, so who knows?
Excellent. I want to thank you so much for taking time and talking to us. I know this is a busy week for you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Promoter 101 in London, England. From the Stones to U2, John is on top of his game. What an impressive guy. That was an amazing interview. I'm so lucky he took time to sit down with us.
You're listening to Promoter 101. This is Martin Atkins from Public Image, Killing Joke, Ministry, 9 Inch Nails. I got a Grammy, a pig face. Fuck off.
Our second feature this week is the Gersh Agency's reigning king of comedy, Agent Rick Greenstein. Promoter 101, we're at the Gersh Agency, and we're joined by one of the giants in comedy. Thanks, Rick, for taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Letting us invade your office, actually. You got to see this place. It's like the bear rug that takes over the room sets the vibe that you're not just in a normal agent's office. You are in someone that is controlling the conversation. Home field advantage.
I like that. But it's an eclectic office, and the bear definitely adds to it.
Okay, so you have an amazing roster, Rick. Brian Regan, Dave Chappelle, Janine Garofalo, John Oliver, Russell Howard, and there's a lot more too, right? Kevin Nealon's your guy.
Right. It's Roseanne, Drew Carey. It goes on and on.
That's an amazing list of acts. And Louis Anderson, who you've had for years, suddenly found fame again playing a woman on a sitcom.
Yeah, Louis is a great one. Louis is a brilliant artist, and, obviously the opportunity with Baskets, he knocked this role right out of the park. I mean, he is perfect, and, he won the Emmy, and rightfully so. He's getting the accolades as an actor that he always should have, and this role really gives him that forum to do it. And it's helping us, of course, on the road as he's getting tremendous press, and the brand has just exploded.
Okay, and he's had a lot of different things in his career. I mean, Coming to America, I think, was very big for him back in the 80s, and he was also the host of Family Feud.
Yes, he had his animation show earlier on, and obviously he's been on television in many different ways, and then he's been doing stand-up throughout the entire career. So this role, though, is really groundbreaking for him. It really shows his range as an actor.
Okay, so let's talk about some history. Where'd you get started in school, and how did that lead you into the business?
Well, I went to school first year at CW Post on Long Island, but then I moved out to Colorado and went to Colorado State University. And while I was there... Fort Collins.
Nice.
Right. And while I was there, I played in a band, guitar player and bass player, and I did all the booking for my band. And I owned the PA system, and, basically I did the production for my band, but I did all the booking as well. So that totally led me into, when I graduated from school, I have a degree in marketing and business administration. I wanted to, marry entertainment with business. And so going to an agency was the building an agency, I should say, was the perfect avenue for me. So a week out of school, I opened an agency and moved down to Boulder, where at the time, which was 83, the music scene there was still pretty vibrant. And I was able to go down there and start working with a huge amount of local talent. Had about 50 bands that I represented after a couple of years. Was also doing theatrical lighting. And ultimately, this nightclub, a great club called the Blue Note that used to be a mainstay in Boulder. When I was there, I started doing publicity for them 3 mornings a week while I had my booking agency. And a few months into it, the booker for the room retired, and they offered me the room. So now I was able to control the best stage and the hottest room in the city, not to mention I represented probably 75 or 80% of the bands in the front range.
So it kind of guaranteed them some good shows when they brought you in as the booker.
Yeah, but it also opened me up to booking national acts. So I started to deal with the agencies on both coasts, and every band on their way up or their way down played the Blue Note at one point in that window of time.
And how big was that?
About 400 seats.
Okay, was that like on the hill by where the Fox is now?
No, it was downtown on the mall.
Oh, that's a good area, right by the Boulder Theater.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's around the corner. It's right next to where Chicago Pizza, I think, still is. But now it's some boutique, some sales boutique.
Oh, Old Chicago?
Old Chicago, yeah, right. Exactly.
It's a cool area right there.
It was great, and the amount of acts that I worked with over the window I was there was great. What I learned was phenomenal, and it really got me interested in moving to the coast. And it opened up a lot of doors for me, so when I came out here, I knew enough people to get interviews and start that process out here.
And was William Morris the first gig?
Actually not. What I did is, I had all these acts in Boulder. So I booked them up for about a year and a half in advance. So I had cash flow coming in. And then I moved out to California and administered their business from California. I ended up first taking a job with TCI, a small agency out of New York that had a satellite on the West Coast, and was there for just a few months. And then they shut their West Coast office down. And through that process, I met Spencer Davis and Al Stewart and a few of the acts that they had represented. And when I went on my own, I started to manage Spencer Davis and also develop a few other acts at the same time. And right at the beginning of classic rock radio, that format was taking off, so Spencer was having a nice resurgence and was working pretty consistently. And was doing that for a couple of years, but then I decided I wanted to join a bigger company and get the access to larger acts. So I actually cold-called APA and called Danny Robinson, an old friend of mine. And he took the call, and I got myself in that afternoon for an interview and did several interviews, went up the ladder, and over the course of a couple of weeks, I ended up getting offered the job there. Their music roster was really what attracted me. Had a phenomenal jazz roster, but they said, we want you to spend half your time in music and half your time in comedy. And I, of course, said, that sounds great. I'm more than happy to do it.
Because Spencer Day wasn't doing comedy when you were working with him.
No, he wasn't. And Spencer, didn't necessarily come with me to APA. He was doing his own thing. But I went in and started working on their roster. So I came in unencumbered, so to speak, in the sense that I had no artists when I first started with them. And so I had the roster to work with, and it was great. And, I had my feet firmly in both areas. And then after about 3.5 years, it became pretty apparent to me that the comedy side was lucrative and attractive. And there were several forms of income that you can make with a comedian. It wasn't just personal appearances, although that's still my soul of what I do. You have all the annuities, and you can put them into television. They can write, they can do commercials and books and CDs and DVDs and, in those days. And there was a lot less competition as far as agents were concerned. At the time, there were, hundreds of music agents doing it for a long time, well entrenched in that world with the labels and the management companies, and a typical long ladder to climb there. But in comedy at the time, there were probably 3 or 4 agents in the entire business, 3 or 4 agencies as well that did comedy. And I turned around and went, you know what? This is a niche business, but there's only a handful of people doing it. And if I go after it and do my job relatively well, within a short window of time, I'm going to have a nice percentage of the business. And that's what I did. And I started with APA, and then William Morris had contacted me and asked if I wanted to come over there to run their comedy department. So I went over to Morris, and I was there for 5 years. And that was like going to grad school. That was great, because not only was I doing live appearances, but I was a liaison with every other department in that company that had anything to do with comedians. So I was educating the syndication department, which is alternative TV, the casting department for TV, the casting department for film, the commercial department.
So when it came to comedy, you were the guy that was in the middle of everything.
Yeah, I was in the middle of it. And what was great is I was in all their meetings, and I was making sure they were familiar with the comedians that we represented. But by osmosis, I learned their sides of the business. And as my clients started to develop in all these different areas, I stayed with them in that equation. And I would engage these other agents, of course, so they would be doing their job, but I would never totally relinquish it. I would stay involved with everything. So I learned how to do a deal to develop a show, or how to do a casting deal, or how to do a radio deal, or how to do a book deal, or how to do a commercial deal. So it really rounded me out. When you're working with comedians, you have to know more than just live appearances, because they are a multi-hyphenate. There's many ways they can go. And if you're going to be a responsible agent and sign clients and really help develop them as clients and build their brand, you can either stay within your own bubble and just know what you do and have everyone down the hallway do what they do, or you can stay active and be aware of what they're doing, and their business will grow and your business will grow, and your knowledge will grow, and your ability to service them and retain them will be significantly enhanced if you can talk the talk and you understand what these other deals are and how they're made. I learned that a long time ago, that you really need to pay attention and be involved. Morris at the time was a great forum for me to do that, but then an opportunity presented itself with the Gersh Agency, which is where I'm at now, of course. I've been here 21 years. And
hopefully it works out.
Yeah, hopefully. I'll see. But they were not in the live appearance business. They certainly had a lot of comedic actors and writers, but they weren't in the live appearance business, and not with stand-ups per se. So I came over here, and it was a great size agency to do what I need to do. Because when you are working with comedians and you need to get your associates' attention so you can work synergistically with the other departments and utilize the resources, you have to be at a company where the size is manageable and that everyone's priorities aren't so in stone, servicing their own books of business, where you can actually get people to think creatively and work as a team. And really the best way to service someone like a comedian is to have a team of people around you. So,
because TV is still the best way to bring a comic.
Well, TV certainly is one of the quickest ways and the most effective, and certainly can be extremely lucrative depending on what kind of deal you have. Obviously, in the internet now and everything going on with the digital opportunities are phenomenal and can come together even quicker than TV now. Of course, you put something out virally, it could be hot in a matter of hours, versus television's a long time to roll it out. But of course, the mechanism and the exposure that television has, especially a series on a hit show, is phenomenally impactful, and can amplify the game for a comedian significantly. So it's still the strongest way to do it.
And even a show that doesn't make it past, even a half-season show that gets yanked, when it's a comic show, it seems to have built them into a headliner just based on the amount of money that a major network has thrown behind them.
Yeah, I mean, look, the longer a show has legs and it's out there and it builds an audience, the better it is and the more impact it's going to have.
I mean, they all want to be Seinfeld, right? At the end of the day.
Well, yeah, great goal to have. But not every show is going to have big impact. Sure, it could take a guy from being unknown to all of a sudden having some credits and going from a feature act to a headliner. But to get to a point where you're a headliner moving hard tickets and moving from the clubs or doing big business in the clubs to theaters, that takes some consistency. 6 or 8 episodes on the air. Rarely are going to accomplish that unless it's a massive hit from the get-go. Usually it's a season or 2. But once again, there's no rules. I mean, in the old days and again now, a hot special, there's a lot of specials out there, 1-hour specials, and most of them, help, and it's part of your arsenal and it's part of your credits. But not often does one just take you from, 0 to 100. But it does happen. And, Netflix now being a very instrumental vehicle now for a lot of comedians. And Netflix, its reach, its territories, the fact that it's on demand has a tremendous amount of power. And it's great. HBO specials and Comedy Central specials and all of it help saturate the market and put the product out there. But everyone has their different beats, but at the end of the day, the end game is to get on the air. Most of them want to be actors. Not all of them will have a series. So you find different ways to get product out there. And, touring is one of the other components of it. But, the best vehicle to accelerate selling hard tickets would be to get on the air in a series in a consistent way.
Big believer in Netflix. Trailer Park Boys never ran in America, only in Canada. And what Netflix did to that, we were early to the party on that. To see Netflix running them here and stoners and late night and streaming was a great combination for comedy. And it only took 3 seconds to figure out this was a place that we wanted to be following up and running behind those guys. So you can certainly see that there's other avenues. YouTube's clearly a space you guys have had a lot of success with. I mean, Miranda Sings, who's TJ's our client, but another big Gersh client, has done amazing in that space. These millions and millions of followers can translate into tickets.
100%. If you can put together a show that is a semblance of a great live show, they're going to come out as long as they understand what it is they're coming to see. But if you have millions of subscribers and tens of millions of hits and people watching your product out there are television shows that would love to have those kind of numbers. But yeah, there's a lot of YouTubers out there. There's a lot of material that is not great, but if you sort through it, there are some really talented people and there are acts starting to hit. Miranda was a great example, which TJ, my associate, TJ Mark Walter, really hit out of the box with her. And we heard about it through a club that had sold, 600 seats in Utah on a couple of off nights. And, we very quickly looked at it and kind of did a couple of more litmus tests of a handful of club dates and saw that it was on fire, all with just tweets. And then we were off to the races. And here's a woman that now has a television show on Netflix, had a best-selling book that came out, and is touring all over the world and doing major theaters. So she's doing significant business and continues to have a significant digital presence as well. So she's monetized several different aspects of her business, and it's growing. So the base that you can develop, off of the internet is phenomenal. Then if you can parlay that into other areas of business, then that's the game plan.
So there's a million of these comics that were hot in the 80s that haven't been able to stay relevant. Gallagher is a great example of that. An act that was headlining and selling out multiple theater dates, now still touring and not able to sell 1,000-seaters in most cases. What is the trick to keeping a talent relevant? Because I imagine Dane Cook's looking for that answer right about now, too.
Writing. What attracts me to brilliant comics and what I think keep them relevant is their writing and, being interesting. being important and growing. You know, if you continue to do the same material over and over again, either you're staying with something that isn't, you know, and I've seen comics that are still doing the same show they were doing 5, 7, 8 years ago. There are people out there that do that. And even ones that are writing new material, but it may not be as strong as it was years ago, or it may not be as relevant based on what they write about. If you're topical, if you're using social economic references, or you're politically oriented and you're relevant, then you can stay with what's current.
So maybe a Gallagher move from watermelons to a more relevant vegetable or fruit.
Well, it worked for him for a long time. You know, I've never repped him, so I can't say. But, you know...
Yeah, I was very careful to pick acts that you didn't rep before I started making fun of them.
Yeah, but it comes down to the writing. And then, of course, how you present yourself. You know, are you smart? Are you oversaturating the market and putting too much out and people get burned out on you? Or are you feeding the machinery, so to speak, in a real smart manner, and you're also using the different platforms at your disposal? I mean, today, if your audience, and most every audience you can reach through social media, even some of the older artists have realized that have been around a long time. You know, staying relevant is the writing, but also you have to be able to reach and touch the audience. And, you know, if you're using social media, that keeps you relevant as well, as far as at least in their face. And they know what you're doing. And are you touring? If you step away from the game, for example, some artists tour while they have a series on the air. Or more often, they get a series on the air, they pull back from touring during the years of production. Then the show goes off the air, and then a year or two later, when they start to realize they have a lot of free time on their hands, they want to go out and tour. Well, if you weren't staying relevant to your comedy audience, even when you had a show on the air, people may perceive you or be introduced to you for the first time as an actor. You could have been touring as a comic for years, but 90% of the country would get familiar with you on a television show. So they see you as an actor. They may not really connect you as a stand-up, as a live performer.
So like a Kevin James, who is very good at stand-up because his sitcom has been in syndication forever, people may think of him as just an actor.
Well, I have seen a lot of examples of great artists that started as stand-ups. They use it as a means to an end to become an actor on a series. They do the series. During those years, they don't tour, or they don't put out specials. And then years later, they want to go back out and tour.
Kind of like Billy Crystal right now.
Yeah, and you know, look, Billy had a unique way of doing it with one-man shows, and they were great, and they were well-written and well-received. But artists that, during their tenure on the air, if they do stand up during that, if they put out some specials, when they do a lot of the interviews, if they talk about their roots as being a stand-up, that makes it easier after the show to go out and still have that audience. And you built it while you were on the air, and then you can maintain it. Now, maybe it falls off a little bit, maybe you maintain, maybe you can build it if you have another vehicle, another show behind it. That's great. But what can be difficult is if you don't do anything during those years you're on the air, and then a few years later you want to go back out and tour, then you have to kind of refine that audience. And some of them may come out and can build a new audience. There's, you know, a lot of opportunity out there, but it isn't as easy if you weren't relevant as a stand-up when your show was on the air.
So somebody like an Ellen or a Rosie, where they had long histories of being a stand-up before they did their other things, their audience would probably very easily reconnect with them as a stand-up because that's never really lost from their egos?
Probably so. You know, when you have a really vibrant base beforehand, and you're doing, when I say that, I mean significant level of theaters, and then you have a show, it can take your business and amplify it 200%, 300%, 400% very rapidly. And you've been established as a stand-up. And most of those artists that do that, very often they will, during the season or during hiatuses, go out and do some dates and just let people continue to see them doing stand-up. But yeah, it's certainly easier to connect the bigger base you had before the show. But if you step away from it for a long time and you come back around to it at a later date, you just got to do it wisely. You got to do it smart. Is there another vehicle? Do you put a special out before you tour? Is there a second series that you're doing? Or have you moved into reality TV or whatever it may be? You just have to be smart when you re-enter that space, although many of them never do because they don't need to. They certainly don't need to financially, many of them that have a lot of success with many years on the show. But artistically, it's such a great forum and a free medium for them to get out and do everything, do their show. A lot of them do end up returning back to the business of stand-up, but, you know, it's the level of that they can do it at, I believe, has a tremendous amount to do with what they did when they were on the air or what they didn't do.
All right, let's talk about your roster. In particular, your roster is very different. There are a lot of agents that have a bunch of urban comics or a bunch of the redneck guys, but you've really positioned yourself with a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and your guys don't really seem to compete or cannibalize with each other. You've gone after the talent, not so much a genre. Was that strategically decided, or is it really act by act that you fell in love with? I mean, if you were a music agent, people would say you had ears because your talent pool is incredible.
You know what? It's all talent driven for me. I'm not trying to develop one specific niche and just, if I have one artist, once again, it comes back to the writing. If an artist I think is brilliant and I relate to it and I think there's an audience for that artist and I can help build that brand, it's a piece of business and I'm going to do it. So if it's in any specific category, I don't really care. I don't care what category it takes me into. And a lot of the artists I have don't really fall into a category per se. They have broad audiences. Brian Regan has a very broad audience, multi-generational. And, he's just a brilliant writer and a brilliant guy to work with. And as John Oliver and Dave Chappelle and Kevin Nealon and the list goes on, Louis Anderson, they all have something unique. And that's the fun for me, is finding a really unique talent that I can work with long term and really help build their business. But I don't really try to go by specific genres now. At the end of the day, if you have a list of 100 clients and you have some that fall more to an urban audience and some that fall more to a different audience or like blue collar, then great. Then you work it and you market to it and you develop their business. But once again, I'm not trying to develop niches. I'm just trying to develop brilliant talent that I can work with.
All right, so let's talk about John Oliver for a second. He had a career that you could almost consider went viral. He was on The Daily Show, and then Stewart took the summer off, and he got to step in. And that clearly was a big step up for his career as far as visibility. And his ticket sales went from clubs to theaters in seconds.
Well, he was already, when he was a correspondent at Daily Show, he was working on the rare weeks that he had open. We were doing clubs for the first several years. And then when we saw the sales pick up, we started to go into the smaller theaters. So he was doing some nice theaters towards the end of his tenure on The Daily Show. When he jumped to HBO and then had his own show, then we saw a huge increase in his business. After the first season, it more than doubled. And then after the second season, then again, it doubled again. So,
it's fair to say that the internet has probably sampled and gone viral with more of his pieces than probably any other comic that has a show.
Well, it's amazing after his show airs on a Sunday night, on Monday, what's happening virally online. The numbers are massive. So obviously broadcast, be it was The Daily Show prior or Last Week Tonight recently over the last several seasons, that's the platform. And then virally, it just takes off, because it's so relevant and so important.
He just doesn't have enough dates for you, right? It's like he'll do multiples in a theater in the same night, or he'll cut down arenas.
No, well, he doesn't do arenas. He likes the theaters. And
but that's a decision, right? Because he could.
Oh, yeah. His level of business can warrant larger venues, absolutely. But he's in production. He's involved in most aspects of that show, behind the scenes as well as on camera.
He's not just talent. He's actually producing the show.
Yeah, he's involved in every aspect of it. So, it's time consuming. There's a lot of episodes to be done. So his time is limited to go on the road. But when he does, we'll either do it in a finite window of a hiatus, which is the only time we really could do it. And he prefers to sit. But his business is so big right now that pretty much any theater in the country, he's going to do multiple. So it's just a matter of how his schedule allows.
He's a pretty mellow guy. He's the kind of guy that walks through the front door and says, when they ask for a ticket, he's like, that's me.
He's a real dude. He's just a brilliant, smart, and pleasure to work with, to say the least.
So he's one of those guys that you don't have enough dates for, doesn't work, but when he does, everybody wants it and it sells. You got another one, obviously, in Chappelle, who didn't work for years after the show came off the air, and then started working again a couple years ago, and has been running across the country doing multiple nights in a lot of venues that are 1,000 to 2,000 seaters and just killing it. So you stayed with him and kept him on the roster. Well, you may never have known if he was ever going to work again, and that gamble wound up paying off big time for you.
Dave and I have been together a long time, and he'll always be on the roster, and whenever he wants to work, I get it done for him. And, he took some years off in between. That's fine. I'm a long-term player. And I believed in him since he was a young guy. And whenever he wants to work, I'm there for him. It's as simple as that.
The comics that I know seem to all agree that he's the biggest at the game at this moment. Do you feel that's an accurate statement?
His business is massive, and he is important, and he is relevant. And he sets the bar for a lot of people. So it's amazing to watch what he does and how he does it. And it's been amazing to be part of it.
To see him be on the show as the alternative guy that's that far out on Comedy Central, and then to come back and get to host Saturday Night Live and be the most talked about host of Saturday Night Live has the nature in catching up, or is he just writing that well that the whole country can get it now?
He's always written brilliantly, but he was the right man at the right time on that show.
But super hip, cutting edge when he had a show on Comedy Central, obviously. And maybe too hip for half the world. But all the cool people were following him. The people that were in the know were clearly there.
100%. And they never left.
But the rest of the world seemed to catch on.
As people hear what Dave has to say, his reach is phenomenal because his message and his material are brilliant. So it's a phenomenon to watch. But whenever he puts anything out, I mean, the Chappelle Show was coveted, and people still watch it all the time. And SNL was the right time for him to do it. And what was going on in the world, that's how things played out. And he was the right man to have the right message, and it resonated. But Dave has a way of resonating with tremendous amount of people, tremendous amount. I've never quite seen anything like it, because he can take extremely relevant hotbed issues, be it racial, be it political, and he can boil it down to its essence of what it's about, and he can write a brilliant joke or, lay it out where the intellectual and the high school kid both get the message at the same time, and which is a big reason why I really believe his audience is diverse as it is, because it's just how he delivers his material, and more importantly than any of it is what he has to say and how he does it. It's, he is absolutely brilliant at the craft. The
way he sells tickets is kind of a parallel to how Garth Brooks has done it, where he just keeps rolling shows and adding dates, going into an arena and knocking out in one night, but playing those small intimate rooms and doing it night after night. Clearly he loves his craft, because he could take a big check and hit one city and do it in seconds, but he clearly stays and does 5 or 6 shows in every market, if not more.
There's definitely an intimacy to those size venues, and there's a certain factor I think you enjoy. Theater shows for comedy are I think one of the best forums. Arenas are spectacles, they're events. They can work if they're produced properly. They're effective, they're certainly lucrative, but it's a different fan experience. And if you like to go into a town and sit down and do a little bit of a residency, really get to touch and feel the people and be there, then the way to do it, if you have enough of a draw, is to sit in a smaller theater or a smaller venue than an arena and do multiple shows.
And when you say smaller theater, we're not talking about 200 seaters. He's playing pretty good-sized theaters and doing multiples with them.
Smaller meaning in contrast to it.
Right.
So, there's a beauty to that. And, if you're not rushing and, your schedule is your own, where you're not trying to knock out 40 cities in 50 days, you're not carrying, music is a different beat. You're carrying a high overhead, and you got the trucks and you got the crew, and, you're working against a large nut. Comedians, it's a different game, so you can sit and, it's a different metrics.
And let me ask you about that, since you bring it up, because Kevin Hart changed the game last year when he took out multiple semis playing arenas as if he was a rock act. Is that level of production in the arena something that you think comedy is going to grow into?
It depends on each act, if it's important to them or not. If their show supports, large production, and that's how they want to present themselves, and they have the business to do it, then you can, as I guess Kevin did do. But I don't think that necessarily the industry for comedians is going that way. I think most comedians like to keep it themselves in a mic with pretty straight-ahead production and keep it focused in on the material and the content and what they're delivering. It's not necessarily about huge production. But to each his own. If it works and your show is got a bigger production and the fans enjoy it and they're willing to pay the ticket price to accommodate it, great. It's all good. There's no wrong answer here.
I can't imagine how you go on as a comic by yourself on stage and play a football stadium, which he did in Philadelphia, I believe, and with the people in the nosebleeds in the 500 level on the opposite side behind the score zone, how you can possibly see your face. I mean, you got to have a serious iMac video thing going on to connect with them.
No question. I mean, typically whenever I go into venues, even theaters over 3,000 to 4,000 seats, usually we want to bring in, video, absolutely. And I've done many, arena shows and amphitheater shows, and you always have to bring in screens because, if you can't make out what the artist is doing, the facial expressions and the physicality of what they're doing as they deliver their material.
That's half the show.
Well, for certain comics, it is half the show, but, still, it is part of the presentation. And, so when you get too big, or to a certain extent, you bring the screens in. It's not a bad thing. The screens enhance it, and you have the option of watching one or the other. But certainly, if you're in the back of an arena or in a stadium, you have to have that to connect.
Okay, and that seems like the industry is going there a little bit because Jeff Wills had started the Oddball Comedy Festival, and that puts comics on that amphitheater stage. And guys like Chappelle or Louis that are used to handling big stage like that, or Amy, it's one thing, but you're putting some of the younger comics that have only played theaters on those big stages. That's got to be a new experience, and seeing them develop into those spaces and seeing if they're able to handle that. Clearly they're not carrying the show, but it's a new experience for most of them.
Sure, but it's a great experience, and hopefully some of those grow to the point where they can headline their own dates in venues of that size. At least they'll have, that experience. But sure, it's a different to play a room of that size. And
it's essentially the Lollapalooza of comedy.
Yeah, but these festivals, as Oddball is, which grew out of some radio shows that were done up at Shoreline for years preceding it, they can work. They work great, but you need that massive production. But there's also nothing like 18 to 25,000 people, roaring in laughter. There's a certain energy in that that's phenomenal. And I've been in plenty of them. And so it's a great experience, but it's a different experience. If you're sitting in the back on a lawn in the back of an amphitheater, it's a great day. And if it's a festival and you're seeing 6, 8, 10 comics, it's a great day. It's a different experience than seeing, some of those artists in a 1,500-seat theater, just as it is completely different than seeing them in a 300-seat nightclub. But once again, to me, it's all good because, people are spending their money and they're having a good time and they're laughing, and the whole cathartic side of what we do, and you go to a show and you have a great time, you come out, you feel great. That's the other side of the business. That's the fun part. That's part of the payoff. So to me, they're all good. Some acts translate better in certain arenas than others, or certain venues, as they say, than others. Some know how to play a bigger room and are higher energy or can command a stage, and some struggle with it. But that's also part of the learning stage of being a performer. Same thing on music.
To jump from the big side of it, which I think everybody would love to believe that that's where it all starts, but to the other side of it, there are comics like Russell Howard who are on your roster that much bigger internationally than, and really hasn't broken past the small theaters yet in America, but clearly you saw something and you think that there's a chance that that's going to happen.
Well, yeah, Russell's an amazing talent, and certainly in the markets where he's built over the years and has shows on the air and put product out in DVD specials as he's done overseas, he has proven that he has that star. He is a star, and that he can do big business, and he's a phenomenal performer, and a phenomenal writer. So the key here is that he wants to build some new territories, and he's touring the world, and he's built preceding coming to the States, I believe. But in North America, we're working on building him, and we do it with a combination of some of the festivals, like Montreal up in the Canadian Festival.
Just for laughs.
And he's toured the States several times, like every year and a half or so. He'll come here, and we're building it. And we're taking it up, and you've promoted some of the shows. And, we're taking it up. But do I believe that he has potential to be as big here as he is there? Absolutely. He's got the chops. He's got the writing. He's got the stage presence. He knows how to do it because it's proven. It's just a matter of building it here, and depending on what product he may ultimately get out here in the States will kind of determine probably the pace upon which it'll build. But I'm all in because the guy's great. He's an amazing comic.
It's funny, when we buy comedy shows, there's a couple conversations that usually happen because the acts and whether it's a Patton Oswalt going out or a Garfunkel and Oates, where you know who they are and you're like, okay, it's this size and it should be this and this is the ticket price. Then there's the other stuff that we have no idea who it is yet, where it's like, okay, they're big or there's something or we discovered them. Miranda Sings is a perfect example where we got the phone call. Just don't worry about it. Just trust us. Something's here. Just pay attention. Mm-hmm. Same thing when you guys called with Russell. I don't know when it's going to happen, but eventually it'll happen. But get in at the beginning. And there's that moment with comedy agents that we've learned to, not all of them, but in particular, a handful of them that we do business with, where we go, okay, they're excited. Something's about to happen. Mm-hmm. It's not always about trusting our instincts, but trusting your guys' instincts, because you guys can break them in. He's one of them where you could feel the excitement when the conversation came up. It's like, it's not about the money, just put the show up. It may not even happen this time, but it's gonna.
Look, well, first off, our philosophy has never been sign 50 and see which 5 stick to the wall. So we're not shotgunning it here. We only sign the acts we're really excited about and we see something. Now, when we're talking to buyers on the phone, if we have information that we can share with you, relevant information of what's happening elsewhere, or sales, or a new series coming out on the air, of course we're going to tell you. There are times we know things we can't say yet because they haven't been announced, but we just know what's rolling out. But we have a good sense. no one has a crystal ball, but we have a real good sense. And, there are times where it says get in early and invest right now, and it may not mean a lot of tickets, and no one may get rich off this run or this given date. But, my track record and the agency's track record are pretty good of spotting talent early and investing. But at the same point, we don't normally bring promoters in until we're at that place where we're ready to do these one-nighters and start moving some tickets. There are the soft dates and the clubs and the colleges and the other stuff that we can develop these acts. And we kind of, as I call it, read the tea leaves. I can get a sense, especially when we're taking an act that we've been able to cultivate in the comedy clubs in North America and then take it to the theaters. You can read the tea leaves when a guy or a lady is moving tickets in a certain fashion and hitting all the bonuses and selling out the rooms, and you keep escalating the price where you've hit the ceiling and it's time to cross over into the hard tickets. And then how do you do it? And normally speaking, with the acts that we've had that opportunity here, we don't come prematurely. We come when we know we're there. That sounds weird.
Okay, there's a couple of them too, but what's really interesting about the acts jumping from clubs to theaters is the acts, when they're selling at the clubs, they're playing multiples usually in a weekend, and they're making way more in the clubs because they get pretty much the entire door. And when they jump to theaters, they're hard ticket, hard expense event shows, so they're making usually less money because they have to carry the weight of that all by themselves. There's no built-in comedy club crowd, and all the expenses of marketing those shows and producing those shows go in the pot. So they literally have to invest in themselves when they step up from the clubs to the theater and give back money, essentially, or leave it on the table that they could continually safely take from the clubs.
Well, usually at that transition point, there is a step back as far as how much you're going to take out of any given market at that time. So, yeah, if we have a comic that's spending an entire weekend in a city and making $20,000 and grossing $25,000 and walking out with, 80-85% of the door, and that same guy comes into a theater and makes $10,000 for one night in a 1,000-seat theater, he may take less out of the market. Now, on that given weekend, we can put two one-nighters together, and he's not making less money per se given on a weekend or in a given month or a given year.
But he's taking less in the market.
He's taking less in the market, but it's only that temporary step back. Look, there are hard costs to go into a theater, as we all know. But there's also the perception you're no longer a club act, you're now a theater act.
The cachet.
A cachet. And that one step, if it goes as planned, that one step only happens once. Because if your business is growing and you're in the right trajectory, then the next time you're in a bigger venue, you can charge higher ticket prices, and then that one-nighter will represent more than you can make doing 5 or 6 shows in a comedy club and tying 3 nights up. And so that's hopefully what you've got to do. But yeah, usually when you go to theaters, you have that one step where you may take a little bit less out of the market because you're not walking out with 80 or 85% of the door or the gross receipts. But, that's generally what happens. But, of course, you got someone who's red hot on fire and it's just blowing right through everything. Then all bets are off because then your one-nighter can be extremely lucrative and blow past what you can make in a club real easily. But it just depends on that trajectory. But that's a conversation I have with the artists and the managers at that time is, look, it is worth going that market, play the 1,200-seat theater, and you'll make X, but you're doing it in one show as well. Granted, you can sell 1,800 seats in a comedy club and do 6 shows and make this, but one show you sell out 12 and now you're a concert act. Plus we can escalate your ticket prices, and it's the right step on building your brand. But you have to invest in yourself, as you said, and part of that is going to the theater and incurring those costs to do so.
Okay, and let's talk about the growth of the agency. So not only do you already have one of the stronger comedy teams in the country where you guys work with the casinos, the promoters, the performing arts centers, but you guys have just recently built by taking on Super.
Yeah, I did bring in one of my oldest and dearest friends, Rich Super, and the folks that work with him at his agency.
Yeah, you think that was a good idea?
I think it was a great idea.
Okay.
Kidding me? I wouldn't have done it. Rich and I have known each other for a long time, had tremendous mutual respect. The man has a great eye for talent and a tremendous amount of integrity, and also a great guitar player, by the way, so he holds my respect in many different ways. But Rich came over with his folks and his entire roster, and it's great because, we are building on a lot of fronts. We are not only building within comedy circles, but a big part of Rich's business has been building stuff outside the box with artists that aren't straight comics. And, we have also been looking to build properties that can sell tickets and that we can develop for television, can develop for books, we can develop in a lot of different ways. So it really isn't strictly stand-ups and comedy.
So you're an agent that's willing to take money from anyone that's talented that you can commission.
I wouldn't quite go that broad, but I'm still very specific. It's a very high bar here. But yeah, we have to think outside the box. I mean, today's business, there's a lot of stuff that opportunities within the entertainment business that aren't strictly comedic. I'm not necessarily looking to build a music roster and build out a whole.
But I think you're talking about more of the digital space and some of the other TV stars, right?
Yeah, and certainly people out of the digital space. Certainly in that world, we're trying to develop, as we did with Miranda, into television, into books, in addition to build a touring. But there are artists that can sell tickets that more on a theatrical side, there's so many facets of it, it's kind of hard. I can't even limit it. But there are a tremendous amount of opportunities that Rich is here to help build, in addition and in tandem with several of the agents that we already have here. We have a great crew of senior agents and a great crew of some great younger agents that are on the street every night and identifying a lot of the young talent that they're seeing, and we're developing them and working, with the resources of the agency in all the different areas besides live appearances and unscripted and scripted for half-hour development and in books and digital, and then with certain artists, there's other areas you can develop into showrunners to run sitcoms or directors that can direct films and direct episodic series. So there's so many different ways depending on the strengths and the interest of the artist. That's the fun part of representing acts across the board. My core is still live appearances. I love it. And comedy is still, my main focus. But I'm looking to build out in a lot of different areas, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, and it seems to be working. You mentioned the guitar thing, and clearly the word is out about your guitar collection. We talked to Jays Marciano in Aspen recently for the podcast, and he mentioned that his guitar collection, which is apparently pretty substantial, is nothing compared to yours.
Well, guitar collecting has been a passion of mine for about 25 years. I've been playing since I was a kid, and I had a bunch of guitars when I was in bands, and then I put the guitar down for a few years while I jumped into business. So for the first 10 years, I was so focused on building everything that I didn't play much. And then I decided about 25 years ago to get back into playing as I started to build a family, and I wanted my kids to have music in the house. And I pulled some guitars out of my closet that I had bought 10 years before, and one in particular I paid $400 for it, a Gibson 335, and I walked down to Guitar Center to trade it in for a new Martin guitar, figuring I'd get $400 for it, give or take. And they looked at it and they said, we'll give you $1,800. And I went, wait a minute, this thing went up 450% in 10 years, and that's wholesale they're offering me. So I know they're going to turn around and sell this thing for $2,500 to $3,000. All of a sudden I went, this grew a lot better than every other investment I had since then. And I started digging down. And that's when the vintage guitar business was starting to explode. So I realized...
So you're trading futures and guitars?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I love guitars, and I started to play. And then when you pick up some of these older instruments, they were just built so wonderfully in the 40s and 50s and early 60s that, I immediately fell in love with the whole vintage thing. And not to mention that they were exploding value-wise, although there's never guarantees in any kind of investment in that kind of stuff. They'll continue to do that, and they do take a roller coaster ride along with the economy usually. But I started to buy, and I started to study, and I really have become a pretty well schooled in vintage guitars, acoustics, electrics, arch tops, all kinds of stuff. So I started to build a collection, and Jay, who I've known for many, many years, he and I kind of share the same passion. And some would say when it gets to a certain point, an addiction, because, when I'm on the road all the time, as I am frequently, usually I carve out a few hours to find the guitar shop in that given town and spend some time there. And it just opens up a really interesting side of my life, a whole network of players and collectors and dealers, and it keeps my hand in the music business because a lot of my friends are players, either professionally or like myself, that have come up playing for years but may not be our primary profession. It's a hobby.
All right, before I let you go, I want to ask you about the comics that you think people should watch. What's not on our radar yet that you think is going to be that everybody should be paying attention to? They don't have to be yours, just comics you think are about to have a big moment.
There are several guys and ladies that I really think are brewing right now. There is a comic named Trey Crowder that came in with Rich Super's company that I think is one of the most brilliant young comics I've seen, which I saw videos online during the election process a few months ago that I thought were absolutely brilliant. Brilliant material, great character. One of the reasons I love him, besides his writing is great, is that he pops. He stands out from the masses because he basically comes from the Southeast. He plays that redneck character that he goes under, yet his material is very liberal, and it's absolutely brilliant, and he nails it on the head. His voice right away, and he stands out from the pack. So I think this kid is going to pop in a massive way.
Nice. Anybody else?
There's another young comic that we represent named Matthew Burchard, who was just on Jeff Ross's roast battle.
Yeah.
And I believe he came in second last night, just aired. Very smart, very smooth, great look, but a brilliant mind also. He has been with us for a few years and kind of came on a lot of people's attention a couple of years ago up in Montreal when he did Ross's roast battle. Not one that was broadcast, but it was at the festival. And he came out of nowhere seemingly to most people in the industry, and at that night also went to the finals. But just a absolutely brilliant writer and very quick. So he's somebody that I really believe in. And with the show last night that aired, I think a lot of people got to see who he is. But he's absolutely great comic as well.
Very cool. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
His talent roster is just so overwhelming. He's just impressive.
Dawn Holliday, currently Hardly Strictly Bluegrass and Persist and Resist. Formerly General Manager, President of Big Billy Incorporated, which was Slim's in the Great American Music Hall for 30 years. And I'm on Promoter 101.
Coming up next, Siren's Management's Adams Parsons.
Promoter 101, we're in London at ILMC, and a truly fun character joining me today. Adam Parsons is with us. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you, my friend. Really appreciate this.
So, through this conference, I've gotten the ability to get to know you the last couple of years, and you're one of the bigger personalities in the industry, but as a manager, you've got a great roster.
Well, it's bands that I love, bands that I grew up with. I wake up in the morning, want to go to work, which is what it's all about. And Dan, you know yourself, it's like, this is a hard business. If you don't like it, then it makes it even harder.
Okay, so I geek out on Stiff Little Fingers and Thin Lizzy and Europe. Who else is there?
Right now, the roster is Stiff Little Fingers, Europe, Thin Lizzy, as you say, Black Star Riders, which is a band that sort of evolved out of the Thin Lizzy lineup, which I can go into later. Saxon, Uriah Heep. I've got a new band called Tax the Heat from Bristol in England. We had their first album out in April, I'm very excited about them. I don't normally deal with new acts, but I normally have a heritage roster. That's what I like to sort of develop heritage acts, if that makes sense. But I've got a couple of new acts, Tax the Heat, as I say, a brand new band, young kids, 18, 19-year-old, called Naked Six, who are just cooler than shit, and I've got a lot of plans for them.
Okay, and you manage your bands for the world.
Correct, all of them.
So bands like Stiff Little Fingers, regardless of how many agents they have for the world, you are the guy that makes the final decision on where they go, where they're playing, and who's doing that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. So I'd like them to come to Seattle next year, please.
I have to apologize about my voice. I've just literally, earlier this week, I was just getting over the flu and my voice is still there. So apologize to anybody that thinks that I sound like Lemmy, but it's not the way I normally sound. Anyway, yeah, we'll make that happen. I mean, literally, the Stiff Little Fingers guys want to tour everywhere. It's their 40th
Is it
anniversary.
you I need to be begging? Is it Andy? Is it a combination of the two of you?
Well, it's a combination of the two. And end of the day, telling you this, unless the money's right, we're not flying in for one show in Seattle. So we've got to make that work. We've got to route it right. But no,
I'll leave that for you guys to wrap, but it seems like we've missed a couple of your bands in the Northwest. I know that Saxon just announced a tour. I don't think you guys are coming our way.
It's hard. Seattle's one of those cities to get, from San Francisco to Portland to Seattle to come up, unless you're literally going into Canada. It's one of those things where, you've got your travel days there. And it's about, with any act, it's about the offer, making it work financially for us, but also, is there a demand there? You're obviously big.
I'm demanding it.
You are demanding it. And I want it to happen, so let's make it happen. But we've got to come to an agreement. You know how that works.
I will write the check. I'm fine with that. But let's route it in.
Well, no, I mean, to be honest with you, we're writing a Stiff Little Fingers tour right now. Andy Summers has his views on where we should go, on the markets that make sense. I know myself and the band, we just want to play anywhere and everywhere that will have us. They are not scared of hard work. They're not scared of getting out there, doing it. Obviously, financially, it has to make sense. But in all honesty, I'm also not going to expect Andy to be routing 1,000-mile overnights that just don't make sense.
No, he's a realistic guy. And with that in mind, for our younger viewers, if you are a Green Day fan, those guys would tell you they're Stiff Little Fingers fans. That's the root of that evil for sure. But you've got a great classic rock roster. Europe is back on the road?
Yeah, they went away for 10 years, 94 to 2004, where most hard rock bands, I mean, the classic rock thing, genres really, I like to call Europe a hard rock band. In the UFO, the Michael Schenker, the Scorpions sort of thing, whereas classic rock can be Creedence Clearwater, can be bands like that. So they've been around since 82 to 94. They took a break like most bands did when the Seattle scene hit, and it wasn't cool for them anymore. And then they came back in 2004 and have been touring ever since and are doing great. Really, really well.
I think I might disagree with anyone that ever said Europe wasn't cool.
Well, I'm just saying in the 90s, it was hard work with a lot of bands because of the way the scene went. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was actually good for them, like most bands, to take a break and to come back fresh. They're on their 11th record now. Final Countdown was the third album. They did 5 on the first half of their career, if you like, and then when they came back in 2004, they're on their 6th album now since 2004. And, they're doing great. We do fantastic business in Europe still. I brought them back to the States 2015 and 2016 for 2 runs, and they hadn't been there for about 10 years.
Also dates that haven't played the Northwest yet.
That's right. Well, again, it's something...
Let's get on the phone with Keith Nesbitt to make this... He's here, right? Let's get in a room. Let's get Keith here.
Keith is here, and I'm looking at putting them out again next year, 2018, when the new record
I can tell you
is.
we won't be airing this podcast until I confirm some... And it's not because I'm holding you up. It's because I don't want anybody else to realize that they're touring and they haven't played the Northwest yet. I want to get those dates in the book. We have to do this in the next couple of weeks.
As I say, well, Dan, the thing is, you and me sitting here is I'm going to make this happen because, it's
Shake on that.
There you go.
Awesome.
There you go. No, seriously.
Love it.
It's where all
and I'm passionate about it. I mean it. Those are shows I want to see happen.
Like the same as me. I want these bands. We've got fans up in that area that obviously want to see them. It's just trying to make it route and then back in somewhere if you're not going into Canada.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, besides my selfless, shameless pitching you in the room, let's talk about your history in the business and how you got here. What brought you to management?
Well, I didn't have any older brothers or sisters, so I got into music late. Apart from watching Top of the Pops when I was 7 or 8 years old, and bands like Sweet and Slade, which I just loved, I kind of didn't really encompass music until I was 14, and within a week that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. As soon as I heard Led Zeppelin, Rush, things like that at school, that was it. I was going to be in the music business, and I decided at 14, 15, I actually dropped out of school. I actually seriously dropped out of school.
You made it through what level?
Well, in England, you don't have to graduate anything. You do your term, if you like, and then you're out. And if you pass your exams, then great. And if you don't, you don't. I got to, for any of the English people out there that are listening to this, I literally got a couple of O-levels, which is nothing. Normally kids were getting 8 to 10 O-levels, then they would go on to college, then university. And I decided that at 14 that I was going to be in the music business.
So you stopped school at 14 years old?
No, I stopped at 15.
You're a pretty well-spoken guy for not going past 15 years old in school.
To be honest with you,
I mean, I've known you for a long time now, and I've never known that, but that's surprising to me.
Well, it's, I'm not proud of it, I must admit. There's been times when I've been in situations, very rarely, but where there's been one time in particular with a very famous English writer who writes TV shows, who writes movies and everything else, and I was tour managing a very well-known British comedian at the time. And I was in a conversation with him, and I couldn't understand a fucking word he was saying. And it's not like just because the intellectual level...
His vocabulary was just hitting it out of the park.
And even the guy that was with me was having a problem with it. There are idiots out there. I run a lot of my stuff. It's just really common sense. I'm not stupid. And there's certain things like math, I was just a natural at. I passed my O-level in math without even doing any work. I mean, my 2 O-levels I passed. I didn't put any effort into it because I wanted to be, but that's a stupid comment in itself, isn't it? I mean, when you're 14 years old, nobody can tell you anything. And, I remember my poor mother was crying when I left school. She goes, yeah, but even the Queen guys got their degrees before they went into music. What are you going to fall back on? I went, Mum, it's not going to be an option. I'm going to be successful in the music industry. If I had a kid now, I don't have any kids, but if I had a kid now that was 14 years old and told me that, I'd slap him 5 ways to, And because at the end of the day, you should get an education. I didn't want to do German. I'm in Germany 4 or 5 times a year. I deal with German labels. I'd love to be able to speak German.
So in hindsight, it could have helped a little bit.
Of course it could have, but saying that, I'm very lucky. I knew what I wanted. I worked hard. And at the end of the day, I'm making a living doing what I want to do. And a lot of people are envious of me for that fact because, a lot of my friends did university, are in jobs that they hate, earning less money than me. So at the end of the day, it all worked out well. But I was also lucky. It's anything in this world, it's right place at right time. And who you do. But I also knew what I wanted very early on, which a lot of people don't have.
Well, and the industry has always been that of personality. You want to work with your friends. It's not about the email address of the guy you've never met. It's the guy you've had a beer with and you've hung out with.
I'm all about the personal contact. I travel a lot. I'm in Europe 4 to 6 times every year, every 2 or 3 months. I'm at ILMC every year. I love this. We would have never have met on an email. If I'd have got an email from you, it wouldn't have been the same thing. It's all about, to me, the personal connect, and having, the fun aspect of, emails and technology is great. It really
But you want to work
great.
with your friends.
Yeah,
everybody does.
Of course,
And if 2 offers are even and you can give the show to your friend or a guy that you've never met before, you're always going to side with your friends.
I'm very loyal to people that I personally know. I'm not saying that there's not times when I have friends that I think there's other people better for certain tasks, but like with agents, I occasionally move agents, I move promoters, but invariably, trucking companies, bus companies I use, road crew, agents, promoters, if I consider you to be a friend of mine and you're doing a good job and you're good for my artist, I will endeavour to stick with you as long as I possibly can.
And why change the success? I mean, it's working.
Yeah, of course.
Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, this is it, But it's great to find new people in the business. I love it when I discover a new band that just blows me away. I get as excited now at 52 years old as I did when I was 14.
Well, let's talk about handling management for the world. You have to deal with every market in the world as a manager, and that's got to take some serious people skills and also some serious clock management because you have to do business at all hours of the day.
That's correct, and I do.
How do you manage that?
I don't sleep.
I would normally think you're joking, but I don't think you are.
Well, that's not true. Actually, when I say I don't sleep, I don't have a normal sleep schedule.
Because you're based in the United States now.
I'm based in Los Angeles, yeah.
So even doing business here in the UK is an 8-hour swing between the West Coast and London, so if you're waking up on a normal schedule, it's your first call of the day as people are walking out of the office.
Well, an average day for me in Los Angeles, I will wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll be on the phone till 10 o'clock in the morning, take an hour's sleep. Then I'll start my US time till probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, have something to eat. I actually have breakfast about 8 o'clock. I've started conditioning myself to have breakfast now at 8 o'clock in the morning. I didn't used to, but it really helps me get through. So then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll take another rest till probably about 7 o'clock in the evening. But again, it depends on what's going on. If I've got meetings, if I've got particular things on a time schedule, then at 7 o'clock I will do a bit more work till about sort of midnight, again get a couple of hours and then get up at 2. That's kind of an average day for me. But it's really, no, it's not good for my health, but it's kind of, I'm used to it. And it's like, and I get, there's me with a croaky voice look after having the flu a few days ago. It's something where I used to that. My clients know that. Most of my clients are European based, and I get them because I'm English, obviously, as you can tell. I know Europe like the back of my hand, and I know, more promoters in Europe than I do in the States, to be honest with you. But being in the States has its advantages for all the bands that do tour. So I get some of my acts based on the fact I'm a worldwide manager, and literally that. So it's hard with the times, but you deal with it,
So being in the U.S. is an advantage for you over being anywhere else in the world?
Well, the weather's better, so I like...
No, but honestly, and that's not America's better. I mean, this is one of the coolest cities in the world. But from a business point of view, there is advantages for you being in the States.
Yeah, but I can work from anywhere. I mean, as long as I need 3 things. I need a phone, internet, and time. That's all I need. I don't need a big office. I just need those 3 things because I'm very hands-on and I do travel a lot. As I say, I do come out. I do get on the road with my bands for quite a few shows, I'm never going to be a manager that's going to sit in my office where the bands never see me. It's just not me. I like to meet people. I think being on the road with them gives the promoters, the agents, a sense that, a surety that I really am committed to my acts. When I'm trying to sell them something, which isn't necessarily going to sell out immediately or even sell out at any point, but is a cool thing to do. I try and get top dollar for my acts that they're worth because we need it. And so I think they need everybody on the team to be coming in with the attitude that they're committed. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a whole lot of sense. So when your world comes together, you're traffic control for the agents, the managers, all of the crew, for everything that's happening worldwide for many, many different acts.
It's hard work. Some people think I can't do it, but I prove them wrong. I have a great business partner, Ace Trump. We've had Siren now for 14 years. Ace and me, we have 10 acts with our solo artists from other bands, which is a lot for two guys, but we have our assistants and our staff, and obviously I have great tour managers as well. I was a tour manager for many years, and I was very good at what I did.
Who were you the tour manager for?
Well, I did various bands. I started in the business in 81, booking bands around my local area. It was a lot simpler time then. When I started getting into music, there was two ways you heard of new acts. Sounds magazine on a Wednesday, which was a newspaper along with NME, Record Mirror and Melody Maker, had all the news in it. And then you had the local rock show on your local radio station, and BBC Radio 1 had the Friday rock show. That's how, two ways I heard about new music, about shows, about everything that was going on in the music industry. In this day and age, I don't know how there's so many formats, we could have a whole conversation about that, but it was very, very simple. I started looking at these acts. I would hear them on the radio, I would see them in print, and I would approach these acts or see them at a local gig and say, do you want another 6 small shows? And I knew some of the pub owners around, and I would just call up blind and I got this band. Some of them were door deals, some of them were £20 at the time or whatever. It was no real money in it. I didn't make any money, but I didn't care.
You guys were learning a trade.
Yeah, I was learning a trade. I actually played drums, and I was managing all the bands I was in. I stopped playing, one, because I was not that great a drummer. I didn't think I was going to be a successful. Plus, it was fucking hard work playing drums after you've been managing the whole thing for the day. You know what I mean? I didn't really want to get up on stage anymore. But as soon as I got offered a job, I had a bunch of drum kits, and the agent that I had for the band I was playing in had some American acts coming over, and he this was at the end of the 80s, and he said to me, can you rent them a drum kit? So I did, and my drum tech at the time that was taking with me was going to go out and look after it. Well, about a week before the tour started, he got offered a gig with Black Sabbath, to drum tech Black Sabbath at the time. This is 89. So I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do? So I hadn't got anything going on really particularly. So I went out on this tour for 2 or 3 weeks with my kit and basically teched the kit. All of a sudden I was on a tour bus and not in the back of a van, and within a week I was the tour manager, because I knew more about than anybody.
Who was the band?
That band was a band called Lizzie Board,
okay,
who I actually managed at one point, and Lizzie and his brother Joey are still two of my best friends. They were an LA hard rock band that were, they peaked in 87, 88. This was sort of just after that. I mean, great fun, great guys. So I stopped playing then. The band I was in, which we had a bit of success at, we were headlining the Marquee Club every 6-7 weeks. We were doing that, but we never got a record deal. So that all imploded. So I started going out on the road, and then immediately started managing an artist who was a friend of mine that had come out of a fairly successful act. He was a great talent. He was his own worst enemy, unfortunately. But and then I started an agency. I thought, how am I going to fund this management company when he's not really earning a lot? So I started an agency, and at that time, the agent that actually moved to the States, that he'd offered me a job 6 months before, but he said, you have to give up playing. Well, at that point, I didn't want to give up playing. So within 3 or 4 months after, I decided that I was going to give up playing, and I started my own agency, just at the time when he went over to the States. So all these acts that were on his books all of a sudden had no agent. So I kind of came in, and within about 3 weeks had about 30 acts. It was all boutique stuff. It was all club level. I knew how to book. I knew how to sell. I learned some very valuable lessons running that agency. And I had 2 main clients at the time. I had, apart from my UK acts, I got 2 labels. One was sort of the remnants of the hair metal scene, and the other was Roadrunner in the UK. And they had all the sort of extreme death metal at the time. And I kind of took roster of acts that was Warrant on one hand and Death on the other. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, it was a weird mixture, but it worked. And I worked again through this US agency. This guy would give me a lot of acts. And I just built this boutique agency up. And it was great until about 93, when grunge was really hitting. And I decided it's too much hard work trying to sell these 80s acts into these promoters that weren't really doing the business. The acts still wanted top dollar.
Have they ever not?
Well, no, and it's still the same nowadays. So I actually got offered a position with a promoter in England, and it stepped me up a whole league. I came in for the first year as a promoter rep, but I was dealing with major league clients, Iron Maiden, Pantera, Metallica, plus a lot of comedy stuff. And I was working in bigger venues, anywhere from the large halls to sort of arenas. And then I kind of got called in the office and was basically a talent buyer for a time for them. And That lasted for 4 years, which was really good experience for me. And then I kind of went back out on the road. I was kind of a tour coordinator. I would put tour managers out. Bands like Queens of the Stone Age, when they were first coming up, I was working with them for a couple of years. I worked with bands like Slipknot. They had a tour manager, but he wasn't experienced in European touring, and they were blowing up. So I came on board and started.
Was Motorhead part of that too?
What happened was in 2000, I stopped being on the road, basically. I took it on an act for full-time management. So I've been a manager solely for 17 years now. Motorhead was something where they needed some help. They had an agent at the time who called me and said...
Was it Dave Kirby?
This was Dave Kirby in America, a guy called Ian Sales. And Ian called me and said, I'm having a bit of a problem booking this act. Can you give me any help? They're looking for a tour manager. I said, well, I'm not tour manager anymore. I'm off the road. I'm into management. Well, anyway, I met with Lemmy. I met with Todd Singerman, their manager, and we kind of had a deal where I would go on the road for a couple of years with them, get to know them, get to sort of put my ideas in, and then we would get another tour manager, and then I'd go into the management office. So I was doing that whilst doing Asia. I was managing the band Asia at the time, and a Swiss band called Crocus, and a few other things. We had a roster of sort of 4 or 5 acts, as well as the work I was doing with Motorhead.
Which is the first time we met. Was when you were on the road with Motorhead.
That's it.
You covered a show in Seattle.
Yeah. I would, again, as management, I would go on the road, and even though we had this tour manager from 2003 onwards, I did like 2001 to 2003 when I was on the road, so I don't know what year it was.
I don't remember what it was, but eBay was a huge thing, because I remember me and Lemmy were joking around about how much money he could get on eBay for his mole.
He kept saying that, yeah.
Yeah, and you walked in and you're like, I don't know how you're encouraging him. I'm the one that gets to commission it. I thought it was brilliant.
Well, I used to travel up, especially on the West Coast. I would still go on the road with them. You know, again, I feel it's very important for a manager to be hands-on. You know, I think you have a great team on the road. And I've fallen out with a lot of tour managers because I like things done a certain way. But if you're good as a TM, then I'm not going to bother you. You know what I mean? You just got to understand the way I like things to be done. Does that make sense?
I'm quite aware when you're unhappy. I've seen that before, and it's not worth fighting with you. You got to get it right and make sure your clients are happy. Adam, you're so much personality. I would love to have you back on the podcast again, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Absolutely, of course.
Thank you for taking the time, my friend. Promoter 101 at ILMC with Adam Parsons. Love him. Stiff Little Fingers is one of my all-time favorite bands, and it's just great to hear Adam. He's such a character.
Hi, this is Stuart Galbraith. I'm the CEO at Kilimanjaro, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Rounding out the podcast this week, we chat with Russian concert promoter Semyon Galperin. ILMC, and we are rocking late night in the suite, and we have one of my favorite all-time promoters. Semyon, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dan, for asking me to come.
So the first time I came to ILMC, you were on a panel, and it was about international music, but you impressed me because you talked about some of the issues that you deal with on a day-to-day basis as a promoter in Russia, and they were things that I take for granted. I don't have to worry about war. I don't have to worry about how a pop star is dressed. And I don't have to worry about somebody saying they're gay or protecting gay rights on stage. And all of these things can get you personally in trouble if an artist happens to stay on stage.
Yeah, you might have the same problems in the future if your president goes in the same direction as he goes now.
All joking aside, I don't think that'll ever be a problem in America. But this is a real problem for you. You could be jailed if an artist that you bring in says something that the government doesn't approve of.
Well, it's not that I can be jailed. It's like different kind of losses would be inflicted on me. The club can be closed because they find some kind of fire misregulation. And we had a case when the Polish metal band called Behemoth was imprisoned for the night of the show. So they couldn't...
an artist literally in prison during a show that they did for you.
Yeah, they said they have wrong visas, but like there were no right visas at all. I mean, they can always invent some kind of bureaucratic thing to kind of cancel something. Yeah, and obviously we have a big problem with Ukrainian bands or bands who were supporting Ukraine in that conflict, or like bands who were even from different countries but who could say something like which Russian government would not really like.
Let's talk about the fact that you're in a different kind of world. You are making a financial investment on concerts, and you're importing artists from all over the world with millions of different diverse issues that we never have to deal with. Is promoting concerts in Russia a profitable concept?
Well, I was counting how many concerts are kind of under this threat of cancellation, and at some point that was like 10%. So basically you add like this 10% contingency to whatever budgets you have, and I mean, it will work out somehow.
So you have to do enough volume where you can handle those cancellations.
Yeah, kind of.
Because it is a thing. You know a certain number of shows are going to cancel because of the world you work in.
Well, probably, yeah, but recently they don't cancel that much because the government kind of understood that when they cancel shows, there is some, like, backlash against it. I mean, people, like, who were never political, they start to be political because their favorite band was canceled. So they're not canceling that much. And also promoters, they wouldn't bring, like, black metal, and they wouldn't bring like Ukrainian bands which are really pro-Ukraine. And I have different kind of shows in Ukraine.
So you promote in all markets?
Yeah, in all
so
kind of
assume we're going to be
formalities.
competing in the States. You're going to come to the U.S. and do shows against me.
I'm afraid of your president.
Let's talk about the drug issue in Russia. Is it prevalent?
I wouldn't say so. I think drugs in some way are getting out of fashion in a way. Artists say like no, we don't need that, and that solves the issue. But I mean, for like EDM events, that might be some kind of issue. I wouldn't say like people are just usual rock shows use drugs that much. Well, Russia is nice to play. People are very hospitable. People are really crazy about seeing. I mean, in UK, people saw everything. In Russia, when you bring an artist to some small city, people never saw that. So
who are some of the bands you brought in the last year or so?
We brought Prodigy, Garbage, Tiesto.
All right, so with the year to come, are you excited? Is this a good year to be a promoter in Russia?
Last year was actually financially good for us because we have this terrible financial crisis. Our currency lost, it costs now twice less than it was. But all the bad promoters, they kind of died. So
who are the bad promoters in Russia?
Well, I can tell you, like B&B Promotion.
They suck, B&B?
Yeah, they really suck. Fuckers.
So what's the big thing in Russia right now? I know Alice. What's the Alice song that everyone should check out on YouTube?
Alice?
Yeah.
Who the fuck is Alice?
Who the fuck is Alice, right? That's the song?
Yeah.
Who sings it?
Smokey was originally
the
band which sang that.
And that's actually the name. Who the fuck is Alice, right? That's not like you ask me, you don't know what I'm talking about. That's the name.
No, the name is Living Next Door to Alice, and somebody added that, like, who the fuck is Alice? So that's
But that's
also
the thing,
a hit.
right? That's a big deal.
That was a big deal like 3 years ago when we told you about that, and you're still talking about that. You should find some new Russian hits.
I should find some new Russian hits. What are some new Russian hits? Let's go there.
I don't know. We have like lots of strange hip-hop acts which talk nonsense but are getting really popular. That's called cloud rap. Do you promote that? Cloud rap?
Cloud rap? No, I don't promote cloud rap.
Basically, it's rap which, the words do not make much sense.
We're going to get back to the bar. Promoter 101 coming to you from ILMC with Russia's finest promotion. My good friend, Simone. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Dan.
Promoter 101.
Yeah, Promoter 101.
Wow, he's playing in a whole other world. Crazy.
Hi, it's Ted Cohen, Warner Brothers Records Road Rat, 74 to 84. I survived, and now I'm here with Dan Steiny on Promoter 101.
Well, that's it for this week's Promoter 101. Coming up next week from X-Ray Talent in London, Agent Steve Strange. From the Vandals, Joe Escalante. From Partisan Arts, Tom Chauncey. And Jeff Goodman comes by to talk a little technology and how the app game works.
In the weeks to follow, guests include Rob Hallett, Ed Bricknell, Steve Zapp, Barry Dickens, Jason C. Miller, Paul Lohr, Trip Brown, Claudio Trotta, Dave Chumbley, Toby Leighton Pope, Ollie Rosenblatt, and so many more.
If you love the podcast and want to share your thoughts, or drop us a review, or think that we should be interviewing someone that we've missed, shout at us. Send us an email at steiny@promoter101.net.
And you can follow me on Instagram at Sara Mertz.
And I'm at The Jew. And you can always find Luke at Luke Pierce on Twitter. Be sure to subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like it, tell a friend. Tell 30. Feel free to drop us a review and tell us what you're thinking.
If you're missing any of the past podcasts, you can always go back and listen at www.promoter101.net.
Some of our past guests include Tom Windish, Jamie Loeb, Harlan Fry, Tom Ross, Mark Cates, Nick Adler, Kevin Lyman, Brian O'Connell, Stuart Ross, Jay Mossy, and I think you get the idea.
I'm Sara Mertz, and for Steiny, have a great week.
Hi, this is Jason Miller from Live Nation, SVP of International and Emerging Markets. You are on Promoter 101.